This week on The Smart Consumer, Rick looks at telemarketing scams against the elderly with his guest, Nora Dowd Eisenhower, the Secretary of Aging. All this and more next on The Smart Consumer.
Hello, and welcome to The Educated Consumer. My name is Rick Hicks, and I am your host from the law firm of Anderson, Galata & Hicks. This program, The Educated Consumer, is about finding out exactly how to take care of your own personal problems. This program is about frauds and scams and how to avoid becoming the victim of those things. Everybody in America is a consumer, but everyone is also capable of being scammed. In fact, con men like smart people, educated people, because that's where the money is. So no matter how smart you are, there's something on this program that can make a difference in your life. And today I have with me a very special guest. Her name is Nora Dowd Eisenhower, and she is the Secretary of the Department of Aging for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Rick. Good morning.
Welcome, welcome.
Nice to be here.
This is the inaugural program, and I am very, very glad that you're here with us today.
Well, I'm very pleased to be with you today.
A couple of special points about Ms. Dowd Eisenhower. She's actually not only the Secretary of Aging, but she's also a former Deputy Attorney General in the Bureau of Consumer Protection. She's the former Executive Director of AARP, and she's now the Secretary of Aging. And I believe that she's got some very, very positive contributions to add to our community audience.
Thank you.
But first, tell us what a Secretary of Aging is, will you?
Well, I'm still figuring it out. The Secretary of Aging is really the advocate for older people in the state of Pennsylvania. And as that advocate, we're really responsible to make sure that the programs, that many things that are happening in and around the state really reflect the perspective of our older population. We have a higher than usual older population in Pennsylvania. We have the third highest percentage of older people in the country. And that has some significant impact on policies and programs around the state. And it's our job to make sure that those programs reflect that.
When you say higher than usual population, what percentage of our citizens are older Pennsylvanians?
We're the third highest in the nation, which means that states like Florida, West Virginia, and probably Arizona have a higher number or higher proportion of older people. The number of older people in the state, and I'm using the number over 60, is roughly 4 million.
4 million people.
Yeah, it's pretty significant. And when you talk about the proportion of older to younger people, a lot of times that has to do with economics. We know that a lot of our younger people are leaving the state, and that's something that's a great concern. But what it does sometimes is tip the balance, and that's something we have to pay attention to.
And what does the Department of Aging do for those people?
A lot of really good things. We advocate for older people. We run something called the PACE program. It's a prescription drug program for low-income people. It's really one of the premier programs of its kind in the country.
Sounds like a whole program by itself.
It is, in a way, and it's funded completely with dollars from the lottery revenues. There are no tax dollars used to provide prescription drugs. It's something that Pennsylvania was really far-sighted about 20 years ago when the program was established. We also work with AAAs, and that's not the Automobile Club. That's the Area Agency on Aging.
I knew that. I
know you did. There are about 52 of them around the state, and they provide services on a local level, really involved in the community. And for the most part, it's really about home and community-based services that older people need around the state.
Okay, well, the subject of today's program is telemarketing fraud focused at older citizens.
That's right.
And I know you know something about this subject. Do you have a feel for how telemarketing impacts on older citizens in the state?
I do, Rick. As you mentioned earlier, I worked at the Bureau of Consumer Protection, and you were my boss there in those days.
Oh, you weren't supposed to
we
tell that.
did some very good consumer fraud cases there, and some of them were telemarketing fraud cases. But I also spent some time at AARP, and what I did for AARP is develop a national campaign around telemarketing fraud. But to do that, we had to do some research. And what we found is that telemarketing fraud impacts older people more than it impacts younger people. So we wanted to find out why. Were older people more likely to be victims because of some flaw? We really couldn't figure that one out. And what we found that it was very much related to the opportunity of the telemarketer to contact the older person at home during the day.
They're at home.
Exactly. What we looked at and what we did find, though, is that there were some people who were more vulnerable to telemarketing fraud than others. But the group as a whole was not any way different from people under 50 or 40 or 30. What the biggest factor was is that they were home during the day and telemarketers could get access to them pretty easily.
Well, I've heard some things like because people are retired, they're trying to stretch their dollars.
That's true.
Because people are at home and sometimes alone, they're sort of lonely and receptive to people who are nice to them.
You're absolutely right. That's a very small group of the victims, though. The larger group of victims are what you mentioned earlier, people who think they're very smart about their money, and they do want to stretch their dollar. They're on relatively fixed incomes. They may have a savings that they've saved all their lives, and it's in the bank, and they may have some access to that to last them for the rest of their life. And so they have access to a little bit more cash than a young family does, who may be using credit cards or paying high mortgages. So they're in a different situation. They really do have more vulnerabilities in that way.
So would you agree that telemarketers actually target older people for whatever reason?
Absolutely. They are very smart at business. Illegal business, but they are very smart at business, and they know that they can contact older people and tap into their vulnerabilities.
In fact, this is a very serious problem. We know that telemarketing fraud is, on the average, about a $40 billion
right.
industry each year.
That's right.
That's not legal telemarketing.
That's right.
That's illegal telemarketing. So this is a problem that we really need to spend some time in kind of a microscopic way looking at.
I think you're right.
So when we come back, what we're going to do is we're going to turn to a real problem. I have a scam on tape that I'd like for you to listen to. And once you hear this 65-year-old lady and this telemarketer talk to each other, I'd like for you to comment on the things that you hear so that we can help our studio audience really analyze the skeleton of a scam.
Great.
We're going to talk about the buzzwords and the things that we think really flag that it is a scam.
Great.
Very
I look forward
good.
to it.
We'll be right back.